Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your archbishop of Banterbury, your pharaoh of physical media, your chancellor of cheerfulness, and lest we forget, your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, Robert Meyer Burnett coming at you. Not just coming at you, robcasting at you, you imagination connoisseurs, you, members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. Greetings. This is Robservations episode number, my God, it's 490. The final week and a half march to the 500th episode, of which I'm woefully ill-prepared for, let me tell you. Woefully. Now, I don't know if some of you joined me at 11 o'clock in Hall H at the Mainframe Comic-Con this morning. I had a lovely conversation with actor Robert Wool about his 40-year career in the entertainment business, and it was great. And if you're interested, right after this show is over, at 4 o'clock in Hall H, it's free. You can just log in and check it out. I will be interviewing the great Hiroyuki Tagawa. And if you've known him from a million different things, I mean, everything from Mortal Kombat to what I like to talk to him about, Philip Kaufman's Rising Sun. The Mainframe Comic-Con is great. They're raising money for charity. This is their third one, and this is the third time that I have been invited back to do panel discussions, and I will be talking to Howard Chaykin tomorrow, which I have to tell you, I am very, very excited about. So join us there. It's for a good cause. By the way, don't just do it for me. There's all kinds of, a lot of great people, a lot of great stuff being covered, a lot of people being interviewed, which is exciting. And speaking of that, I wanted to talk to you about comic books, specifically DC comic books. As you know, on Monday, there was basically a bloodbath at Warner Brothers. And about 800 people were let go. DC Universe, the streaming service, was basically gutted. And it's been announced that all of the shows, including things like Titans, everything that was on DC Universe is moving over to HBO Max. Some of the people at DC Comics that were laid off were, of course, well, they're going to be losing their positions. Editor-in-Chief Bob Harras. Editor-in-Chief Bob Harras. Senior VP of Publishing Strategy and Support Services, Hank Canals. VP of Marketing and Creative Services, Jonah Wayland. VP Global Publishing Initiatives and Digital Strategy, Bobby Chase. Senior Story Editor, Brian Cunningham. And Executive Editor, Mark Doyle, who oversaw the rollout of the Black Label graphic novels. And Jim Lee remains the CCO. Roughly 1/3 of DC's editorial ranks are being laid off, according to sources. That's pretty... also a victim of the layoffs, DC Direct, which I have bought many an action figure from DC Direct. DC Direct, the company's in-house merchandise and collectibles manufacturer, the division has been shuttered after 22 years. Another move that was rumored when Warner Brothers Consumer Products began taking a more active role in DC merchandising. My only problem for that was DC Direct did a really good job of creating cool stuff. I really like DC Direct, and of course, you know, I get it. I understand downsizing. It makes a lot of sense to me. Gary Beekler, Nerdrotic, has talked a lot about this week, and he knows better. He used to own his own comic book store. I'm sure in the future he's talked about owning another comic book store if there's any comic books to put in comic book stores. But this whole thing sort of makes me sad. Now, I get it. AT&T took over. It was not unexpected that these kinds of massive layoffs were going to happen. But my problem is, and the same thing is happening at the studios in their home entertainment, their physical media departments. You know, you get rid of you get rid of people that have been there for a long time. Well, one, they're expensive to keep them there. But what you're getting rid of is institutional knowledge. And when it comes to, like, say, a studio's legacy, if you don't have people that know the product, I mean, really know all of the movies that Warner Brothers owns, it's problematic. I don't know what the status of Warner Archive is, but Warner Archive is terrific. I've often talked about on this show how when you buy a Warner Archive Blu-ray, the bit rate, there's more data on the discs than there are on even Warner Home Video releases of brand new movies when they come out on disc for the first time. And Warner Archive has been doing a wonderful job. I mean, okay, they might not have put my beloved Wild Wild Planet, one of my favorite Franco-Italian co-productions from 1965. And if you haven't seen Wild Wild Planet, go to YouTube, look up the trailer for Wild Wild Planet, watch it, and tell me you wouldn't want that on high definition. I mean, they put out the green slime. They can put out Wild Wild Planet, can't they? Well, luckily they did put it out on DVD, so that's something. But I certainly would like to get it in HD. But anyway, where is DC Comics now? I mean, a third of their editorial staff's gone. What does that mean? Well, yesterday in the Hollywood Reporter, Jim Lee was interviewed, talked about it, and I missed this. I wanted to discuss it. But here it is. Here's the article that was in the Hollywood Reporter. DC's Jim Lee on the company's future. We are still in the business of publishing comics. Well, that's good to know, Jim. Especially after this week, I wonder. Let's see. Boris Kitt wrote this article, obviously. There is no pencils down notice, says the exec who weighs in on this week's major layoffs, Digital Comics, interim editor-in-chiefs, and a new Batman book from John Ridley. Jim Lee, the superstar artist from the 1990s who rose up through the executive ranks of DC to reach the top rungs of the company, has had better weeks, I'll say. Like perhaps the week Wildcats was introduced, or maybe when X-Men 1 came out. Monday, Warner Media enacted deep and painful company-wide layoffs. DC, the home of heroes such as Batman and Wonder Woman, saw the scythe cut 20% of its staff, with many senior editors let go and a reorganization implemented that sent shockwaves through not just the company, but through the comic and DC fan community. This week has been a really heavy, difficult time, not just for me, but for the entire organization, Lee tells the Hollywood Reporter via a Zoom call. We've said goodbye to people that have had who have been huge contributors and who have helped define and make DC what it is today. As soon as the layoffs news hit on Monday, the rumors soon began in earnest. AT&T, which acquired Time Warner in 2018 to form Warner Media, wants out of the comics business. Other rumors suggested DC will no longer put out comics and that Lee would be demoted from his role as publisher and chief creative officer. The Hollywood Reporter brought these rumors and more to Lee, who outlined what he could with a reorganization that will take the next 2 or 3 months to play out, and while the team is still putting on the finishing touches on Fandom, I keep saying Fandom, but Fandom, Warner Media's blockbuster fan event set for August 22nd. That is next week. It's interesting. They are announcing a movie there, an unannounced film. Of course, John Campy and I speculated that they were going to announce a new Superman movie. Now, we have no reason to think that. There's been no evidence to support that. But if you were going to announce a new movie at a DC Fandom event, what would be the most exciting thing? We've already got a Batman movie coming. There's a Wonder Woman movie coming. You've got Zack Snyder's The Justice League, his cut of the Justice League coming. I think the only thing that could be more exciting is if they announce Superman. And there's been a Superman the Movie. I mean, that's the full title, Superman the Movie. But there's never been a movie called Superman. And I would say that if you consider Zack Snyder's trilogy, I call it now the Man of Steel trilogy, Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, and the upcoming Snyder Cut of Justice League, to me, after the Snyder Cut of Justice League is complete, the Superman we know and love will have been forged. The Man of Steel will have been forged into the Superman we know and love. I think that would be the most exciting. They bring Henry Cavill back to play Superman. They're going to announce a new Superman movie. I would suspect, as we've heard, as has been rumored, that they're going to announce J.J. Abrams directing a new Superman movie. Now, I want to see a new Superman movie. I think J.J. Abrams is not a very good director of theatrical features. For me, he's made... I like Mission Impossible 3, even though it was a glorified TV show, and then he's made 5 movies that none of which I've liked very much. So hopefully, I know he's going to probably write and direct a Superman, but he needs to do something under his new $500 million deal, and I'm sure that that would be a fine way for them to announce all of that. So I would expect, if I was a betting man, that they are going to announce a Superman movie with J.J. Abrams directing. Now, I'm pulling that out of my ass, but I'm just speculating if they want to get people fired up and they want to give somebody a real boost. I don't think there's anything more exciting than a standalone Superman movie, the likes of which we haven't seen we're closing in on a decade. Actually, 7 years, but hey. But with this DC fandom event, with DC Comics being gutted, and there is talk, if DC, can you imagine? DC gets out of the comic book business, which means other companies, whether it's Dark Horse, whether it's Boom, whether it's Image, they can license out the DC characters to carry on those torches. I mean, how weird would that be? History in the making or history in the unmaking? Both at the same time, perhaps? Jim Lee says, "We are still in the business of publishing comics," Lee adds, saying that there is no work being halted. There will be more Batman. John Ridley, who won an Oscar for penning 12 Years a Slave, is writing a Batman miniseries. It will have huge impact on the rest of the line, Lee says. And there will also be the return of Milestone, a label that features underrepresented heroes and creators. Dwayne McDuffie started Milestone with other black comic creators. They had Icon, Static. There's some good characters. I have all those books. So that's exciting. I think that's exciting. I think that's also a way that you can have an exciting comic series that's dedicated to, well, I guess they would broaden it out, but if it was all black creators, I think that would be terrific, because a lot of those books are really good. I really like the Milestone books. Why not bring them back? There will also be the turn of Milestone, a label that features underrepresented heroes and creators. Lee takes on the fate of the DC Universe, changes to the publishing line, and the seismic shift the company made amid COVID-19 to break from Diamond comic distributors. As we know, a couple months back, DC, they did cut their ties to Diamond, which had been distributing comics for the better part of 2 decades. Amazing. Is DC still publishing comics? This is Jim Lee answering back. Absolutely, 100%. It's still the cornerstone of everything we do. The need for storytelling, updating the mythology is vital to what we do. The organization leans on us to share and establish the meaningful elements of the content that they need to use and incorporate for all of their adaptations. When we think about reaching global audiences, we see comics as helping drive that awareness and the international brand, and it's very much a part of our future. That said, we will be reducing the size of the slate, but it's about looking at everything and looking at the bottom 20%, 25% of the line that wasn't breaking even or was losing money. It's about more punch for the pound, so to speak, and increasing the margins of the books that we are doing. It was about aligning the books to the franchise brand content we've developed and making sure that every book we put out for a reason. Now, that's interesting. Are they going to get rid of flippers? Are they going to get rid of individual books and go to a graphic novel only format? I have to tell you, I wouldn't mind that. I only buy graphic novels, hardcovers, omnibuses, that kind of thing. I haven't bought new comics at a comic book store in a long time. I prefer the hardcovers. They're easier to manage. I just enjoy them more. And I understand reducing the size of the slate makes sense. I mean, it certainly does, because, hell, if the books aren't selling, and let's face it, comic books with digitally, people have digital platforms now, and the business has really changed. And let's face it, comic books are a lot less sexy today when you've got incredible video games, when you have your favorite characters, you can play them in a game. There's other places people are turning to. Comic books have had diminishing sales and diminishing readership for a long time, but yet comic books are where everything begins. You now have 2 interim editor-in-chiefs, Marie Javins, who headed digital strategy, and Michelle Wells, who headed the YA imprint. How's that going to work? We thought it would be a great pairing to bring them together to help draft and organize the content we're doing along these lines. Across digital, across global, we want to make sure we have diversity and inclusivity, and making it the way that we have the authenticity to the storytelling that we're doing. Again, this idea that you're beginning, as I said, the Burnett axiom is never put your universe and never put your agenda before your characters and your stories. And it's worrisome to hear we want to make sure we have diversity and inclusivity and making it in a way that we have authenticity to the storytelling that we're doing. Listen, I'm all for diversity and inclusivity, especially when it comes to the voices that we're getting. I think it's the people that should be hired. The more diverse and more inclusive voices we get to hear, authors publishing stories that bring us different voices is always a good thing. But to be talking about that, the first thing we have to worry about is diversity and inclusivity for a company that's publishing stories is worrisome. I understand it's a sign of the times, and I get it, but I don't trust anyone's agenda when they start talking about diversity and inclusivity when their job is to tell good stories. Because I don't think the way to tell good stories is to talk diversity and inclusivity. The way to tell good stories is to tell good stories with great characters. Diversity and inclusivity is not something that brings you great stories or great characters. It's really about consolidating all of our efforts and having every editor involved in all of these directives, and also organizing, broadly speaking, in content that is for kids 6 to 11 and then 12 to 45. Come on, man, I'm older than that. I'd like to think that some DC comics are directed at me too. It's about consolidating format and oversight to a smaller, more concentrated editorial group. I don't disagree with that. I think it's good. You know, get people that are really passionate. Do you still have the title of publisher? Jim Lee says, yes, he does. Does your job change at all? I have more responsibilities and more expectations than ever before. In conversations with Warner Media CEO Jason Kilar and Warner Brothers CEO Ann Sarnoff and my boss, Warner Brothers Global Brands and Experiences President Pam Lifford, they have some very ambitious goals for DC, and I'm excited to be a part of that. In that respect, there is more on our plate than ever before. I will continue to be involved as intimately with publishing as I have from the get-go. Nothing has changed there, and that's to focus on the creative content, the creative strategy, how many books we should be publishing, and the formats. We're bringing in a general manager to the organization. My role, the way it was envisioned 10 years ago, was that I would always have a partner that would focus on the operational side. The general manager we're bringing in has a wealth of marketing experience, global partnership experience, general business development experience. That person will start in September. Here's my problem, too, with, doesn't matter, across the board. And this is the way of the world, I understand when companies happen, when mergers happen, the problem is they bring in generic general managers. You know, not necessarily a general manager that has a passion for comic books. Should they have a passion for comic books? Perhaps not. But I always think it's probably better when you have a market that's as specific as comic books or DC Publishing or DC Direct. I mean, it's too bad they got rid of DC Direct because the products they made, not everyone, but for the most part, were very creative, very interesting, and they were very much in touch with what fans wanted. And I think when these mergers happen, you get generic. What's the word? What am I looking for? You just get generic business management. You don't necessarily get the business management that DC Comics needs. But let's hope that isn't the case. Do the layoffs or reorganization mean that planned comics are still happening? Are the comics that would have been announced at Fandom still happening? There is no pencils down notice. Everyone has been notified to keep working on all the projects that we've already greenlit and started. To that extent, there's no change. DC in the spring broke away from Diamond as its distributor and signed with 2 new companies. Some people said at the time it would be a mistake. How has it fared? Not only has it exceeded our initial expectations, but the size and strength of the business is that same level or higher than pre-COVID. There was a lot of fear-mongering out there about another Heroes World type of debacle that occurred decades ago. There's nothing further from the truth. Things have transitioned very smoothly. That's not to say there aren't kinks that need to be worked out. UCS and Lunar, they've done an amazing job transitioning all the content we produce and putting it into new pipelines and getting it to retailers. And we've gotten some tremendous numbers on some of the recent books. We're back to press on the Joker War storyline that has been running in Batman. Multiple printings on that. In fact, every issue since its launch has gone up in numbers, and you know how hard that is. Usually when you launch, you start big and the numbers go down, but here it's climbing issue to issue. We got our numbers for 3 Jokers, and the first issue sold over 300,000 copies, and that's an $8 book. That's really good, by the way. That's good. That's good to hear. That's a gigantic number for having new distribution. This wasn't about taking our distribution business and placing it in the hands of two entities. It was about what can we do together to do things that were never contemplated before, things that would love to do to grow the physical market. I mean, I love hearing that. I hope that's the case. I mean, go DC. I'd love to see DC continue on and thrive in this marketplace. It's been a long time since we heard of our comic book, the official comic book store of the Burnettwork, Jacob Fudge's store, Comic Relief. I've not heard from Jacob in a while. I hope his store is doing okay. And I would be curious to hear him weigh in on this. How's that been going for him? One rumor I heard this week is that DC is going to only sell trades and OGNs and make a deal with Marvel for them to publish DC's comics. Jim Lee laughs. There's nothing further from the truth than that. I don't know where you would even connect those dots. Why would we ever do that? What about the rumor AT&T hates comics and wants to get out of the comic business? I don't think they want to stop us from publishing comics. Comics serve a lot of different purposes, and one of them is it's a great way to incubate ideas and creating the next great franchises. We want to continue that. Why would you want to stop that? Why would you want to stop creating great content that could be used across the greater enterprise? I think this is a really good point Jim Lee is making here. It is an incubator, and if you look across the street, what Kevin Feige's been doing, how many stories, how many comic books have served as the inspiration for the Marvel Cinematic Universe? I mean, they've liberally borrowed things, but, you know, the Winter Soldier, right from Ed Brubaker's run, they touched on the Demon in a Bottle storyline in Iron Man 2. Those comics, I mean, you could even I would add millions of dollars to the budget of those DC movies, because having those incubators and having writers out there penning these stories is development. Call it active development by comic book writers. I think that's something that you should definitely be considered. I totally agree. What's going to happen to the DC Universe? They ask him. The original content that is on DC Universe is migrating to HBO Max. Truthfully, that's the best platform for that content. We always knew this was going to happen, and it is the best platform. The amount of content you get, not just DC, but generally from Warner Media, is huge, and it's the best value proposition. If I'm allowed to use that marketing term, we feel that's the best place for that. Absolutely. Most of the people at DC Universe lost their jobs. In regards to the community and experience that DC Universe created and all the backlist content, something like 20,000, 25,000 different titles, and the way it connected with fans 24/7, there's always going to be a need for that. So we're excited to transform it, and we'll have more news on what that will look like. It's definitely not going away. Well, that's good to hear, Jim. What is the future of DC Direct? And this is sad. When we first started, we were one of the first companies, if not the first, to go out and create a business that catered to that specialty market. That success has brought in a lot of competitors and a lot of companies that are now in that space. So it's about evolving the model. We want to produce those collectibles and serve those fans, but we will probably shift to a higher price point collectible and more of a licensing model, working with manufacturers we already work with. From a consumer point of view, there will not be a change or drop off in the quality of the work they're seeing. Behind the scenes, how we create it and how we get it to them is going to change. We still have our principal lead of DC Direct, Jim Fletcher, with the company. He will be showcased in a fun panel with J. Scott Campbell at Fandom. Where do you see DC in 2 years? You'll definitely see more international content. You're going to see a lot more digital content. When you talk about growing our business, both physical and digital, to me, the opportunities are global. That's what we'll be focusing on. Sometimes that takes the form of content that we take here and translate and sell in other marketplaces. But we want to partner with creatives in various territories and unlock stories that feel authentic to their marketplaces with characters that they can embrace as their own, and look for opportunities to take those characters and seed them throughout our mythology. Hey, you know what? That all sounds good. You know what I'd like to see more of? I'd like to see creators from around the world, say in India, say in European countries, France, Germany, Japanese and Asian, whether it's Japanese, Korea, or China. It'd be interesting to see more takes on, like, what would a Justice League series coming out of Japan look like? I'd be interested if you allowed Japanese creators to, say, play in that, or Indian creators to play in that sandbox and create those characters. What would the Indian version of the Justice League look like? I'd be down with that. I think that could be interesting. With digital, that's more of a windowing issue, meaning we'll go out there with digital content, and the stuff that performs well in digital also performs well in print. A good example of that is Injustice, the digital comics that tied to the video game. When that came out, it was the best-selling digital comic of the year. It outsold Batman, and we brought a lot of adjacent fans into our business. And when we took that content and reprinted it in physical form, we sold hundreds of thousands of units. It was a big hit in physical as it was in digital. We're using that as a model as we go out and do more digital content. We'll take the most successful books and repackage it as physical books. I think there's definitely a business to be had in physical periodicals. But that said, I think there's a greater upside in digital because we can go to a more global audience and the barrier to entry, especially in this pandemic, is lower. It's a lot easier to get digital content into the hands of consumers that want to read stories. We want to lean into that and think thoughtfully what digital content should be and what it should look like in the format. Well, none of this is very surprising. We all know the same thing is happening to our beloved physical media. Everything's going digital, and I guess, is that a good thing? I think it's inevitable. And again, all I'm interested is I want to continue reading great stories with great characters. And, you know, when I hear about inclusivity and diversity being the first and foremost thing that they're looking for, inclusivity and diversity does not guarantee good stories or great characters. It does not. And the idea that you know, you put inclusivity and diversity before great stories and great characters is a mistake. And, you know, one of the things that I find interesting, and I haven't talked about it on this channel, but again, Gary from Nerdrotic talked about it in other channels. The Critical Drinker did a great piece on it. Man, I love that guy. I don't agree with him 100% of the time, but I certainly love listening to his pieces. They are incredibly well written and a lot of fun to watch. But there was let's just say, a non-traditional piece of artwork, well, Wonder Woman 1984 piece of artwork, and I think that, I guess I don't understand. There is something running through all of our franchises, all of them, Star Wars, Doctor Who, Star Trek, now our comic book franchises, where there is this weird desire to make the characters in all of these franchises more relatable to the common person, the common human being, and I don't understand that. When you're telling stories of gods or demigods, for instance, I don't need to personally relate to these people. They're gods and demigods. I want to read stories of amazing feats of strength and ingenuity. I don't want people that I relate to, like that I could bro down with at the bar. I don't want that. I don't think anybody does. I think, again, Star Trek is at its finest when you have the very best of the best dealing with very difficult situations. I don't want somebody that I'm more able to personally relate to. You're telling a story, if it's in the Star Trek universe, in the Star Trek universe. I'm already distanced from the Star Trek universe. I can imagine I'm in the Star Trek universe, but I don't want to bro down with a character that might have, say, a learning disability. I mean, I get it. That could be the focus of one episode, and it can be. You know, I mean, Elizabeth's not a fan, but Charlie X is an episode very early on about a kid who had no social skills. You know, he didn't grow up around people. And it was a very interesting episode. I really liked that episode of early Star Trek, and it has a pretty killer ending. So I have no problem with dealing with that kind of thing, but I don't want to read a story about a superhero that I find relatable. Now, Peter Parker is relatable, and of course I love the Teen Titans because they were relatable as well. But let me tell you, I mean, Dick Grayson in the Teen Titans was the best of humanity, and his girlfriend was an alien. And I mean, I want to read that kind of stuff. They were better than me. So we shall see. I don't want to see the comic book market destroyed. I want to see it stick around. And I'm hoping that DC will be able to pull it off. We'll see what happens. Sometimes, I mean, I think the jury is definitely still out. I'm a little worried for old DC Comics, but we're going to find out. We will see. The proof is in the pudding. David Miller wrote me a letter. David Miller writes, "Hello, Rob. Greetings from the unfashionable arm of the western spiral end of the galaxy. I know that this is a topic that may be a bit prickly, but I'd like to share a little fanfic with you and the rest of the imagination connoisseurs. I'm not concerned with the powers that be because this is a little vignette that they would never consider doing. It concerns giving Captain Kirk a happy ending. Perhaps not the kind of denouement people expect, but after his fate served up to him in generations, I feel he deserves a dignified final reward. When you said happy ending, I was thinking something else. Maybe you are. So my thanks in advance if you decide to read this on air. And now Playhouse 90 presents Kirk's Reward. Our story starts at the end of City on the Edge of Forever, the scene where Kirk, Spock, and McCoy reunite, embracing each other and reveling in their reunion. Across the street, a smile breaks out across the face of one Edith Keeler. She begins to take the first steps toward the trio when behind her appear another incarnation of Kirk, Spock from 5 years in the future. They have with them a Corby model android that is an exact duplicate of Edith Keeler. Future Kirk grabs Edith from behind and places his hand over her mouth, while Spock sends android Keeler on her date with Destiny. The three stay hidden as the delivery truck strikes the android, killing her. Keeler's eyes widen in shock as she is witness to her own demise, while Kirk can't help but snap shut so as not to see the horrific scene again. Even though he knows Edith will live, he can't help but relive that pain of that awful moment. Then Spock says, "Captain, our mission is completed. I suggest we return to where we belong. And when?" Kirk, "Agreed, Spock." And with that, the three leap into eternity. Appearing again on the other side of the Guardian of Forever, Kirk, "Are you sure they won't discover our little hoax, Spock?" Spock, "Undoubtedly, Captain. The Corby model androids are indistinguishable from human anatomy, far superior to the mud-type androids, and even if they weren't, the Depression-era authorities would not waste resources on an autopsy in such a clear-cut case of vehicular manslaughter. I'm sure she will be buried without any embalming." Keeler, still in shock, stands numbly as Kirk pulls out his communicator and says, "Kirk to Enterprise 3 to beam up." They soon appear in the transporter chamber. All crewmen exit the room to give Kirk a moment alone with Edith so he can try and explain everything. He explains that their 5-year mission is up, and he was allowed to perform this last task before returning to Earth. Still in shock, Edith nevertheless takes him at his word, and she is escorted to the bridge so that she can behold a sight that she could only dream of before. In awe and enraptured, she gazes at the viewing screen. Spock answers as many of Edith's questions as he can. Finally, he turns to Kirk and asks, "And what now, Captain?" Kirk, "And now, Mr. Spock, the ship is yours. I will be resigning my commission upon reaching Starfleet Command, after which I will help Miss Keeler select a nice little planet to settle down on." "Are you sure, Jim? Is that what you want?" "Just one more thing. And what's that? To love you forever," as they kiss and fade to black. Well, David, what a romantic you are, sir. I like that ending. I'm all for that. Although, you know what? The Corby androids, man, I mean, they weren't exactly the most convincing androids in the world. I mean, look at what happened when Roger Corby was revealed to be one. He had looked like his skin was peeling off, and you saw like transistors underneath. So I don't know if that plan would work, but maybe they're more souped up than when we last saw them. This next one comes from Hillary, and Hillary brings us good tidings and news. And she says, AMC reopening in well, you know what? Hillary might not be a girl. It could be a boy, after we all know that Sir Hillary, was James Bond's undercover name in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Sir Hillary Bray. So, yes, Hillary. AMC reopening in Utah with 1920s pricing. Article in the Deseret News today. You'd enjoy about theaters trying. Well, here we go. I'm going to put this in the live chat. Apparently in Utah, they're opening movie theaters. And here let me put this link in there. We'll see how that goes. Hopefully it will be good, Hillary. I want to thank you for writing in and share the local news with us. By the way, I want to hear from all of you around the country. Are movie theaters opening up? Are you all going to make me jealous that you have Tenet tickets? Because so far, we're not going to have any Tenet tickets. I want to know, will they, can we sneak into the Chinese theater on Hollywood Boulevard and figure out a way to show Tenet to everybody? Because I'd really like that. Calvin Bose is here. Calvin, our favorite dad. Dear Rob, I do not like the way studios treat fans anymore. They forget that we are the ones who make the money for them. I remember when they used to welcome fan interaction. Let me show you what I mean. I've always been a big 007 fan. I became a fan after seeing Live and Let Die on the screen. In 1974, before Man with the Golden Gun came out, we decided to make a James Bond newsletter and create a local James Bond fan club called James Bond in Phoenix, as I lived in Arizona at the time. We started by writing to Pinewood and Eon Productions asking for info on our new newsletter, and sent out the first news item and they accommodated us by sending some stills and information on the shooting of the film. We sent them a copy and they congratulated us and thanked us for our hard work. The following few years gave us info on the court case preventing The Spy Who Loved Me being released, but when they started shooting, they sent us photos and info again as they were happy with what we had printed. The relationship was pretty good, and we got some interviews, and they were always eager to accommodate. We put out 2 newsletters a year, and when we had no new news, we would print short stories and poetry, and the company always said nice things about our newsletter and thanked us for what we did. Over the years, our newsletter's quality got better. As I said, they were always grateful and told us they looked forward to working with us. We were publishing from 1974 until 1995. Wow, that's amazing. 21 years. In 1995, after requesting info, we got a letter telling us to cease and desist, telling us that if we continue publishing, we would be sued. I did not understand why in 1974 they're all happy and in 1995 they tell us to get lost. Now I ask you this because you've worked in the business. Why in 1974 are they happy and in 1995 they are threatening a lawsuit? All we ever did was print what they sent us and it never changed. Do they not realize that our newsletter was free advertising that cost them nothing? Why do they treat fans like crap today, and why can't they treat us the same in 2020 as they did in 1974? Well, Calvin, the simple answer is that, well, it's money. They have to exert much more protection over their IP, basically. In 1974, the ancillary markets didn't exist the way they exist now. You're talking, and even in 95, remember, GoldenEye, at that time, there was a 6-year gap between the release of License to Kill and GoldenEye. 6 years was longer than there had ever been a gap since the Bond film series started in 1962. And that was because of more legal shenanigans and Kevin McClory and all that craziness. So perhaps after all that lawsuit and all the rigmarole that prevented the franchise from putting out a movie in 6 years, they were too gun-shy. They couldn't afford and they couldn't risk. They had to protect what they had won in court. So unfortunately, with the world that we live in now, the studios, they have to do that. And I think what's really interesting and what's sort of sad, as our social media presence has grown and the internet grew, studios had no choice. I mean, we were still in 95, the very early days of the internet. And, you unfortunately were there. You'd been doing it for 21 years, but they didn't care because the new rules that were being written. And remember, we're still in an evolutionary period of time. What does that all mean? Who owns what? How do they own it? Obviously, I was involved with a project that still to this day is very it's still mired in lawsuits. Why the producer of that project wants to continue to get into lawsuits, I don't really understand. I guess one more reason why he doesn't have to finish the movie that he should have made. But I don't know. But it's a different world now, and it's never going to go back to the way it used to be. It's interesting. Mike and Denise Akuta, when Buckaroo Banzai came out, the Banzai Institute, I used to get the Blue Blaze Irregulars newsletter. And that's a very interesting story. One day, maybe I'll have Mike and Denise come on the 500th show and talk about that. I'd love to as a way of creating fan engagement. Interesting. But thanks for writing in. Thank you for writing in. This next one comes from Tony Washburn. Tony Washburn says, Rob, Destiny Captain here. Do you remember Power Records from the 70s? Oh, yes, I do. And a phoenix shall arise. I had Power Records, Planet of the Apes Power Records, Superhero Power Records. The one I listened to the most was Captain America and the Falcon. Adhesive X. It can't be. The man who invented it died years ago. I know. I buried him. Man, I used to love Power Records. Power Records were, it was a booklet, and it came with a comic and then a record. And you put on the record, and it was like a dramatization of the comic you were reading, so you could read along with the record. It was awesome. It was awesome. I love them. So yes, Destiny Captain, I do. Do you remember Power Records from the 1970s? They were a read-along comic pack with a 45 or 35-speed record that featured the story in the form of an audio drama. I had a few of those back then. My most favorites were Star Trek stories. I did not know until very recently that a few of them were drawn by John Buscema. I never had, believe it or not, Star Trek Power Records. One in particular that I love was called The Time Stealer. It was a story that featured a barbarian and a sorcerer beaming on board the Enterprise and engaging the crew in an attempt to a time-twisting entity. What's great about the art is that the barbarian, Conrack, is essentially stylistically Conan the Barbarian. So in essence, in this book, Kirk and Spock meet Conan the Barbarian. I stumbled upon the line drawings for these stories while searching the internet the other day. They were sold at auction a few years back. Here's a link to one. Well, I'm going to put this in the live chat too, so we can take a look at what that looks like. So there you go. Dun, dun, dun. Actually, you know what? I'm going to click on this because I want to see it. I'm going to look at it now. You guys can look at it. We can look at it. Oh, see? That's great artwork too, man. Wow. That's really cool. Also, I got a message today that the Alamo Drafthouse where I live will be reopening on the 20th of August, just in time for Tenet and New Mutants. If you want a ticket, let me know. Man, I'm telling you, I don't think we're going to get them in LA. I do want a ticket, but I want to be able to come. I want to see Tenet in laser IMAX. Can you make this happen? Can somebody make this happen? I mean, apparently cases are going down in LA. Let's open those theaters, man. At least I just want to see Tenet. Throg Buscemi Capicciolo says Zavi is very reliable. When do you want to announce the giveaway for Liz Views that we talked about? Throg, I remember talking about various things for you. We should talk about it soon, but I don't remember. If Zavi, that's good to know. I'm getting my first package from Zavi either today or Monday, so I'm excited about that, which is exciting. Exciting and new. And then Throg also writes in, George Romero was always to me like a crazy old grandpa, specifically like the one in Joel Schumacher's The Lost Boys. Through indie directors Don Coscarelli, John Carpenter, and Sam Raimi especially, I discovered other titles with dead in the title. As a child, the thoughts of being devoured by loved ones or doing the devouring myself intrigued me, and I devoured night, dawn, before the day. So I've watched on some of the most used tapes at what was a mom-and-pop video store that later became a Blockbuster Video. Love the drive-in section and the horror. I miss being able to interact with people at video stores, especially now that people are becoming more knowledgeable about film or even flat screens and projecting home theaters. I miss those weekly or daily trips. Glad my oldest was able to experience that before Blockbuster went out of business. I'm going to join the chorus of thanks today. Elizabeth and you have provided Sarah and I a weekly show or two, a chance to unwind together and laugh. Robservations is a godsend. It allows me to get my inner geek out. I'm glad you, with this community and staff, are around. I've made friends with some of the nicest people like Richard, Claude, and even you. I know when I can get a Robservation in, 8 to 15-year-old me comes out. Thank you, Patrick. Well, Patrick, thanks to you during the pandemic, which is still going on, Elizabeth and I were able to wipe our bums with beautiful, beautiful toilet paper, which we still have some, which is great. Now that the toilet paper crisis is over, but I thank you for that. I really like hearing this. I mean, nothing makes me happier than the fact that this community exists outside of me. That people are making friends and they're talking to one another. I too. I mean, I feel like whether it's Jacob Fudge and we're hearing about Comedy Relief, whether it's like Claude and Candida, who we've adopted as our couple, Kaz Graphics, the cheesemonger of the channel, but also everybody that writes in letters. I mean, who would have thought that BL Alley would be everyone's favorite emerging parody filmmaker, or that Dieter Bastian and Patrick Keller are going to be our new filmmaking duo from Germany, where we can't wait to see the next chapter of The Secret Exchange, which I hear chapter 2 is coming. I mean, this is kind of what I had in the back of my mind, but I didn't know how it would develop. I mean, literally, when I decided to do this channel and do this show, I basically just sat down in what was our laundry room and flipped the switch on the microphone and turned the computer on and talked. I had no idea what would happen. And now, of course, I've sort of upped the level of production a little bit, but the community's only gotten bigger, and I think it's great. Now we have the Richard throwing watch parties. I mean, literally, the ethos of the Burnettwork continues almost 24/7 nowadays, and that's really exciting. And again, I have to thank you for your ongoing support of all kinds, and I'm glad you like to participate. It's funny. I have to. I actually. I was telling. Sometimes I'll get accused of people will write in the comments. They'll basically they call me and other YouTubers internet panhandlers. Like we're sitting on the edge of a freeway on ramp with our cups out like that. But then somebody always reminds me again, whether it's Elizabeth or somebody else, that we are putting on a show. Like it is a 2-hour. I do pretty much a 2-hour show every day, and sometimes, man, I don't want to do it. Like if I'm busy, I can't do it. But there are times when your chancellor of cheerfulness, truth be told, is not always cheerful 24/7. And there's been times when I'm like, man, if I can't find anything to talk about or some work thing didn't go, But when I do go on, I have to say it always makes me feel better. And like yesterday, I honestly at first was frustrated about what was I going to talk about, and I just decided I'll talk about Dawn of the Dead, and I think it was one of the most fun shows I ever did, and obviously everybody was pretty engaged by it, and I'm getting letters about it. Maybe I should just do more shows like that. But I really appreciate the letter, and thank you very much. And again, to all of you members of the Post-Geek Singularity, what a great group we have. So that's an amazing thing. This letter comes again from Johnny Stewart, who I used to work with on that Mirror's Edge commercial back in, 10 years ago. Crazy. We did a Mirror's Edge commercial. It was 90 seconds. It wound up playing on MTV, which is cool. RMB, I have aimed to keep this terse. Let me start by reminding all of the known that the internet and connectivity is our most unfathomable, evolutionary, taken for granted game changer to date in human history. Well put. I would put it up against relativity and rocket science and anything else. You can say that those came before, but I tend to think that the microchip came from somewhere else. Modern computing and the internet has, of course, allowed us to all consume, explore, participate, connect, get laid, and evolve in ways we never could have imagined. And it has forever changed us, and I am a product of that age. As a kid who came of age in the late 80s and early Nirvana 90s, I explored cassettes and VHS tapes until quickly thereafter moving into CDs and soon then to Napster and then to DVDs and later into YouTube, all of which have molded my life. My grandmother, of course, had 8 tracks in vinyl, which I consumed as a very near novelty and now collect. There were some Laserdiscs in there somewhere. That's my generation. You could call us early millennials, but we were really on that edge between Gen X and ourselves, whatever we were. If you ask me, the first song I ever downloaded on Napster, it was probably quite ironically a Metallica song. I remember when our family got its first computer in 1995, an IBM Aptiva that cost the family over $5,000. Thanks, Dad. He worked tirelessly in the military. We were software kids. Soon after, we had a modem that could run at 28.8K, and as one does, I Googled Heidi Klum topless. Of course, kits were included to expand our software understanding, such things as the human body and the Encyclopedia Britannica. But I was quick to search out and find early games such as Wolfenstein 3D and Duke Nukem, which my friends and I traded like commodities on 3/4-inch floppies. Soon after, the release and exploration of such games as LucasArts' The Dig would mold us forever. I don't know. If you don't know it, you got to play it. The Dig explores elements of humanity and first contact rarely explored at that time, outside of Whitley Strieber's groundbreaking book Communion, which details not only the UFO phenomenon, but dare I say, abduction. Now to The Prisoner. My parents were both born in 1950 and came of age in the mid to late 60s, both impacted by the society of the time. My father, while in his senior year of college, while of course watching The Prisoner, received a letter from then President Richard Nixon informing him he'd been drafted into the failed war. My father soon after got news that his best friend at the time was killed in the NAM. R.I.P. Benny Parker, forever in our hearts, on the wall. As we all know, the late 60s was a time of change and tumult like we rarely see. Assassinations, war, political upheaval, magic mushrooms. The folks comparing today's problems and walkathon protests to the late 60s uprisings clearly have no understandings of the reality then. I mention this only to shine a light on The Prisoner. The Prisoner was a perfect psychological product of its age and thus become timeless. Many at the time felt like they were, for certain, prisoners within their own cultures, within their meaningless jobs, within the war. You had the anarchists, you had the hippies, the Beats, of course, hi Kerouac, and of course you had the Beatles, which not only summed it up over again, but then took it all to the next level with Abbey Road and Sgt. Pepper. That is The Prisoner. At that time, The Prisoner was the TV equivalent of the Beatles, and of course you have Beatles songs late in the series. The Prisoner, much as it may have helped those that lived at those times, has helped me to understand those times even more, and subsequently now my times. It is not simply a revolutionary series from the perspective of today's TV nerds. It was revolutionary to the people at that time. It had a point of view which explored story themes and psychology and allegory and structure none had ever really seen, challenging them to the idea that the theme of the individual was the most important commodity. The need for the individual was the most important thing. The Prisoner was there to explore, remind, and reinforce the thought that not only was there someone out to get you, but that it was, in fact, you, yourself, that could entirely determine your future and save yourself. You alone. That was the ticket in 1968. Many now tend to think that some collective thought or some political action or some corrupt member of DC will be their saving grace, but nay, it will be they themselves that will save them, such as The Prisoner said. It has become aware to me that the only real thing out there now in commercial entertainment that helps push these ideas terrifically are those of David Lynch, oh Captain, my Captain. I feel as though Lynch may be the only one that survived the terrific war on humanity that has been waged, the only man that has forged his own path, making his own unique and weird representation of not only what society is today, but dare say the guide to escape it. I hope you've been watching his daily weather reports during this pandemic. His psychological horror has clearly been inspired by such things as The Prisoner, probably very greatly, and his incantations have not merely been made to entertain us, but to help guide us to where we should go, as did The Prisoner many moons ago. Alas, I can only say so much, yet I try. Best wishes, Johnny. Well, Johnny, be seeing you. What a great director. What a great letter. Thank you very much for writing that in. It's great to reconnect with you, if only via the internet. I look forward to continuing our discussions. So thank you for that. What a great letter. I love these reminiscences of people getting their geek on. It's a lot of fun to hear from everybody where their geek came from. This one comes from Bob Connolly. Hi, Rob. I loved hearing your story about seeing Dawn of the Dead for the first time and your unrelenting love of it for the past 41 years. I first saw Dawn in 2004, renting the DVD when I was in college. At the time, and even for quite a while afterwards, I was not a particularly big fan of horror movies. There were exceptions, but for the most part, it was a genre I didn't enjoy. It wasn't that I found horror movies too scary. It's that I'd gotten the impression from my limited experience that most horror films tended not to care about their characters. Characters in many horror movies seem to exist just to be killed in the most gruesome ways possible. And if a movie doesn't care about its characters, then why should it? I'd like to step in and say, because I read a lot of horror fiction and stuff, I think horror is one of the most, in a way, moral of all the genres. Because, there's a lot of immorality, but at its core, it is somehow about preserving humanity, preserving the impulse, the human impulse. Even Frankenstein's monster is seeking out its humanity. And it gets destroyed by the inhumanity of man. But one of the things I've liked, that's why slasher movies were not my favorite. I much prefer movies like Rosemary's Baby, or I've waxed rhapsodic about Hellraiser on this show. And one of the things I loved about Hellraiser, and I still love about Hellraiser, is that the Cenobites just don't show up to terrorize you. You have to summon them. You have to want your soul torn apart, because the pleasures of the flesh in the real world just don't do it for you. And I always liked that idea. It was apparent, though, that Dawn was different. I felt invested in Peter, Fran, Steven, and Roger from the get-go, one of the reasons I liked the movie. And the moment Roger got bitten, I felt crushed. Even after more viewings than I can count, it hurts me every time. It does, man. And when Roger's face is revealed, when the sheets get pulled down and he sits up and he's the zombie, every single time, you feel great loss. I've seen the movie 100 times, and every time I'm like, maybe this time you won't go. But when he does, it's like, oh, man. Yes, Dawn of the Dead is an incredible, groundbreaking piece of maverick filmmaking with sly wit and smart social commentary, but Romero and the rest of the cast rarely seem to get credit for giving us characters that we really care about. Over time, I came to have a greater appreciation for horror and look at it now like it's anything else. There are good and bad examples of every kind of movie. Still, though, Dawn remains my absolute favorite horror film I've ever seen, and the better zombie makeup effects of today don't matter nearly as much to me as the filmmaking, storytelling, and character drama that Romero masterfully put into that movie. Like you, I also really enjoy Night Riders, which is maybe the coolest premise any movie has ever had. Jousting on motorcycles. The movie's not perfect by any means, but it's a lot of fun and clearly heartfelt. You also asked what movies left impressions on us and have stuck with us since childhood. There are quite a few for me, but probably the two biggest are Ghostbusters and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Being born in '82, I didn't see Ghostbusters until it was on VHS when I got it for my 6th birthday. A few months later, my dad took my brother and me to see Roger Rabbit at the Oak Tree Theater in Seattle. Wow. All right. And I still remember going that day. The thing that makes both... Did you go to Dick's Drive-In afterwards? The thing that makes both of these movies so special to me now isn't simply nostalgia. Nostalgia doesn't have the kind of hold on me where I can convince myself that a bad movie is good. I love those movies now for entirely different reasons than I did as a 6-year-old. I get so much more out of them now while still being able to cherish the memories I have of seeing them for the first time. Finally, in honor of Steve Martin's 75th birthday, I want to recommend to everyone out there my favorite of his movies, 1991's L.A. Story. While it is a satire about a very specific time and place that most people didn't experience firsthand, myself included, Martin's screenplay speaks to every outsider's stereotypical beliefs about Los Angeles in a way that the comedy translates wonderfully to the intelligent audiences. It is a movie that manages to weave critical and sometimes very cynical humor with a true sense of joy and hope. It's an extraordinary movie that is too often overlooked. Thanks for reading this, Rob. Hope your day is perfect, baby. Perfect. That's very funny. When he says perfect, baby, perfect, that is a reference to when Peter and Roger are putting these semi-trucks to block the doors of the Monroeville Mall in Dawn of the Dead. And good reference. I like that. What a great letter. Thanks for writing that letter into me. I really appreciate that, Bob. Great letter. Very life-affirming, too. Thank you very much. Let's see. We've got one from Omar94. Omar says, "Hi, Rob. You've worked in the film industry, so you might have experience on this. I was reading about movie productions, noticing how some movies started filming without a completed script. Jeffrey Boehm was constantly writing for Lethal Weapon 3 even after that movie started shooting. I worked a little bit on Lethal Weapon 3, and it was indeed a mess. Boehm also stated Lethal Weapon 4 started filming without a completed script, but he wasn't involved with the production, as he wrote a Lethal Weapon 4 script which everyone at Warner Brothers liked but didn't use. Daniel Craig said there was no completed script when Quantum of Solace started shooting due to the writer's strike. I don't know how people in Hollywood pull it off, but if I was a filmmaker, I would never start shooting a movie without a completed script. Thanks and live long and prosper." Well, Omar, the best laid plans. Gladiator shot without a completed script. I mean, there was a script, but it wasn't very good. They knew they were going to have to rewrite it. And I have to tell you, I mean, a lot of movies, believe it or not, are very iterative as you move along. If you watch Hearts of Darkness, A Filmmaker's Apocalypse, Coppola was constantly rewriting the script for Apocalypse Now the night before they shot, even the day they shot. They would change things a lot. That happens a lot, actually. But a lot of the time, movies are beholden to scheduling when they can get an actor in place. In the case of Quantum of Solace, it was during the writer's strike, so the script wasn't there. Then they pull the trigger. They've got the money they need, so they go onto a schedule and hope they can work it out as they go. And indeed, sometimes they can. Gladiator is a testament to that. But it's not the best way to work. I would never budget or schedule a script before I was at least 95% on it, unless I had an actor with limited availability and I had to shoot them out, and I don't have a choice. But it is kind of a pain in the ass. So, yeah, I mean, it's can be very, very problematic. So yeah, and you know. It can be really, really, really tough. Really tough. This next letter is, well, hang on. You know what? I'm going to jump back into that. Let's see what you guys are saying right now. What are you saying? I don't know, but I'm about to find out. Damn it. Wow. Okay. Ready Teddy Seti sends in a tip and says, "Hello, Rob. I can never seem to catch you on Campia, so I came on over here. My favorite anime OVA is Birdie the Mighty. Have you seen it? I have not. If you have and you liked it, tell John to check it out. I have not seen it, but I'll have to check it out. Yeah, I'm on the John Campia show usually Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. John has been more sporadic because there's less and less movie news, which I understand. And if there's nothing that he wants to discuss, he'll do an open mic, which I get it. So yeah. But thanks for being here. I will look up Birdie the Mighty. Do any of you know it? I don't know it. Willow sends in a tip and says, going off my question about Amy Adams in Arrival the other day, would you want to have the heptapods gift and know how your life will play out, or would you prefer to remain ignorant? That is a very good question. Like, would you like to know your future? I would say no. I wouldn't want to know my future, because the problem is if you have the heptapods gift and you see your future and you know it's immutable and you can't change it, I would rather not know. I mean, look, do I want to live as long as I can? Yes. But let's face it, I mean, it gets to a point, look, I would like to make at least 4 more movies. I'd like to direct 4 more movies before I die. That's my goal in life. And I think one of the problems was, like, I had a goal in life to direct a movie when I was 30, and I did that, but I didn't have anywhere to go after that. I just assumed that I would continue to make movies. And while I've continued to work in film, I haven't actually got to make movies. And I think making movies, I love the whole process of making films. I wish I could make more. And I'm working on a project I've wanted to make for a very long time now, and we'll see what ends up happening with Tango Shalom. And I've got a lot of stuff in the works that will keep me going. And I think that's important. Yeah, I mean, I'm driven by, like, it seems strange, but my IMDb profile, I always want to try and add something. If I don't add something every year to my IMDb profile, I feel like that's been kind of a wasted year. And hopefully this year, Tango Shalom will come out. I'll have the 8 episodes of the Netflix show that drop, and then I have the Hills Run Red Blu-ray that will be added to my IMDb, and I think that's a good year. But as long as I can keep doing that, and I mean, it's interesting to think that I have a lot more life behind me than I do in front of me, but that doesn't bother me. The process of getting older. Look, if I develop some hideous genetic ailment or cancer or something and drop dead, well, that would suck. If I get hit by a bus in the next 6 months, it would suck, because I really want to see Dune, No Time to Die. I really want to see Top Gun Maverick. I want to see Justice for Han, or as we call it, the Fast Saga. And keep going. I just like to see where things go. If I could live to be 1,000 years old, I would. I would love to be able to go through history like that. If I could hook up with, like, a Miriam Blaylock and she could turn me into a vampire for 300, 400 years, man, I'd be all over that shit. Totally. But I don't think I would want to know what the future held. I really don't. It wouldn't be good for me. Ashley is here. Ashley says, "Hey, Rob, greetings from the UK. Today I visited the cinema for the first time since lockdown. I went to see Inception at the Odeon IMAX. We got the Inception and latest Tenet featurettes, no Dune or Wonder Woman 84 trailers. Cinema was immaculate, lots of sanitizer stations." Oh, man. I would love to have seen Inception in IMAX. Seating was staggered. We wasn't, however, required to wear masks. All in all, I felt very safe and enjoyed my experience, planning on seeing Tenet next week. Thank you, Rob, for all that you do. Well, Ashley, thank you for supporting the channel. You've got to report back when you see Tenet. I don't care. It's going to be out there. I'm going to read the reviews. I want to hear what everyone thinks. Please write in and tell me. And congratulations for getting back to the movie theater. When you walked in, there's that movie theater popcorn smell. Did you smell that? Man, I miss that so much. John Ortiz sends in a tip and says, "Hey, Rob, I saw that Seth MacFarlane is going to EP and co-script Winds of War and War and Remembrance for NBC Universal. The headline ran, Seth MacFarlane goes to war with NBC Universal. Nice clickbait headline from Bleeding Cool, a.k.a. Bleeding Stool." Well, as you know, if you watched yesterday's show when I showed you this Winds of War poster, Winds of War and War and Remembrance, if you those collective, that's like 42 hours of programming. And they have a tall order. When Winds of War is almost 40 years old, not the book, but the original movies, the miniseries. I mean, think about that. We're 40 years further along from World War II. I love Winds of War. We'll see. Yeah, I don't know. I'd love to see that happen, but that is a gigantic endeavor. That is a massive endeavor, and I just don't. I don't know how that's going to work. I really don't know how that's going to work. Mark C says, so how long do you think Jim Lee had to study the corporate talking points before doing the interview? Probably for a long time. He really, the corporate speak was strong with that one. Yeah, I mean, look, I understand. You're corporate minders. He still wants to have his job. Jim Lee's got to eat. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. Bums me out. Anonymous sends in a tip and says, hey, Rob, big fan from the UK. Here's a question I like to ask people who I know their stuff. Which, if any, horror films do you prefer to The Shining? For me, The Exorcist is number 2, which I guess is saying something because I'm irreligious to say the least. Stanley Kubrick is my hero. And I like The Shining, but to me, that was Kubrick making a B movie. I think The Shining is one of the least of his films, to be honest. And I think The Exorcist, is my favorite horror film of all time. But up there, I mean, I think Dawn of the Dead is a better film than The Shining. And this is not to take away from Kubrick. I just don't think there's not, Stanley Kubrick movies are so multi-layered. There's so much going on in them. And in The Shining, I just think it's so slight when you think about Kubrickian movies. Rosemary's Baby is another one of my favorite horror films. I mean, but it's funny that you say I like watching The Shining. I think for what it is, it's good, but it seems to me like it's Kubrick's B movie. I mean, even a movie like The Killing has more going on than The Shining does. Although I like The Shining. But, horror movies, man, I don't, The Shining's up there, but is it, I don't know, it's hard for me to say. I don't hold The Shining in, I'm conflicted because Stanley Kubrick's my favorite director. But I think The Exorcist is a much better movie than The Shining. It's much more interesting. It has a lot more to say about the human condition. And it works as both a horror film and social commentary and criticism. And ultimately, it deals with the matters of faith. I mean, for me, one of the great things about The Exorcist is it deals with Father Karras. I mean, Father Damien Karras. He's lost his faith in God. And really, to me, The Exorcist is about a man a priest who's lost his faith, a Jesuit, an educator at Georgetown University, lost his faith. And in confronting real evil, true evil, the devil, he discovers his faith again. And that rediscovery allows him to save the soul of an innocent. And he sacrifices himself in the process. I mean, that's heady stuff, and it's epic storytelling. And look, and I also like, Mercedes McCambridge swearing and that much too vulgar display of power, Karras. I love all that stuff. It's great. And I'm not even Catholic. When I saw The Exorcist the first time, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, man, if I was Catholic, this would have scared me even more. Mark C. sends in a super chat and says, Jim Lee doesn't understand that digital is not where comics wants to go. Them and cookbooks will have the mass market appeal of print. His love of digital will be the final death nail of DC. Look, I agree, man. Digital comics are fine, but I really like the act of, as you can see, opening a book and reading the comics, man. I mean, I love that. I love having a book. It's interesting because I like it when my favorite books are heavy. The absolute editions. I've Sandman's my favorite comic book series of all time. And I love the fact that there's these beautiful absolute editions of Sandman because the weight equals the importance of it to me. So the heavier the book, it doesn't make any sense. But I like getting large, tricked out special editions of my favorite books. If they're slipcase, the heavier the better, because I equate, if I buy a special edition of something I already love and it's really heavy, it's because the ideas are so good. But I think you're right. I mean, people, especially comic book fans, it's fun to collect things. And I watch more and more videos where people get their comics slabbed and they get their CGC boxes and they unbox them. I just sit there and watch and see what people got slabbed. Like, what are you getting slabbed today? I love that shit. I got stuff I'm going to finally send in to get slabbed, And I look at this stuff and I think, okay, yeah, so much. I just got to do that. But yeah, I think that will be the death of. I at least I hope not. I mean, I really hope not. Where was I? I'm wow, down further. Phage Lives is here. Sends in a super chat. Didn't the sun go supernova and the portal get destroyed? Time travel. Wouldn't the Enterprise pick up the Enterprise from the future? Sun goes supernova and the portal got destroyed. Are you talking about the Guardian of Forever? I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about here. I don't know which thing. Enterprise C? I'm not sure. Robert Battinson says, I saw Tenet tomorrow night. I inverted myself to tell you it's a great film. Well, thank you, Robert Pattinson. Good to know. Good to know. Mark C. sent in another super chat and says, in reference to James Bond Phoenix, 1995 would see the release of the official 007 magazine licensed by UA and Eon. Well, there you go, Calvin. That's exactly why they had to kill. Somebody licensed the ability to release a James Bond fan club magazine. So they had to, if someone's going to license something out, you can no longer publish your fanzine because that interferes with the license that they sold. Well, Mark, that is good to know. That is an actual legit answer to the question. So there you go, Calvin. Mark C. comes back and says the official 007 magazine licensed by EA and Eon came out in 95. Bye-bye to your publication. But they could have told you that. And I think if they told you that, then you would have been like, oh, okay, I get that. I can deal with that. That's really interesting, Mark. Thank you for that. That's good to know. Dan V is here. He says, just to add some context with DC, it costs about $10 million to run the comics side. Jim Lee said 20 to 25% of the comics released broke even or lost money. That's not surprising. Both companies should scale back, and the Black Label does the best besides Batman. Yeah, and they killed that too. I mean, look, they got to figure out the business model. They got to make the business model work. Bottom line, and I hope they do, because I don't want to see the I don't want to see comics go away. Julius Goodwin sends in a tip and says, I just wanted to write and say good afternoon. So how long do you think it will be before we see you enjoying a bottle of homemade Cabernet Sauvignon with Miss Elizabeth, just out of curiosity? Well, Julius Goodwin, for those of you out there who don't know, sent us a kit to actually make our own wine. Now, today, this is a true story, today at lunch, we opened up the box, the kit, and we're looking through it, and it comes with a book that talks about, a booklet on how to make wine. And it does say that while you can drink wine you make immediately, it recommends that the wine you make, you let it age for 6 months. So I think Elizabeth and I are going to try it. We're going to attempt to make our own wine. And Julius not only sent us this box, this kit on making wine, which is very generous of him, but it looks fun. Like, I'm looking at this, I'm like, oh, we got to do this. Julius also sent us, this is the best. So I have been getting, not anymore because I have a 2-party authorization system now. I don't know if people have heard about the scam that was coming from China where you would just get boxes of stuff that would show up on your doorstep. Well, I was getting boxes of random shit from Amazon, like you put conditioner on your head and you'd put a cap on that would heat your head up. So weird and random. What they would do is they'd use a gift card and they would just send random stuff to people so they could show that those up the sales of those products or whatever. They don't do that anymore. So I thought I got a bag in the mail from Amazon that had a bunch of wine corks that you cork a bottle of wine with. And then I was like, oh, these must have come from Julius. So we got those last week, but we got the kit this week and a book on, Julius sent us books on making wine. So we are going to make wine, but I think, Julius, that would age it 6 months. And that would be kind of fun. I mean, whatever we have to do. But the kit's really cool. I'm really excited. And as I said, right before I went on the show today, we were sitting at the kitchen table, and Elizabeth was going through and telling me, oh, it's 6 months, and we're looking at all the pieces. It's very exciting, sir. Very exciting. Emil Johansson is here and says, gonna see Tenet. We'll let you know if I get sick. I hope you don't. Dan V goes on to say, a lot of comics said to be canceled were ending soon and not really canceled. The exceptions are Teen Titans and Young Justice. If Milestone really returns, that's a big deal where I don't see the point in complaining about diversity and inclusivity. Oh, I agree. I mean, the Milestone comic universe was, in fact, it was black creators. But, that was, of course, its mandate. And that's what, so to me, if you said, we're bringing back the Milestone universe, if we're bringing back those characters like Icon and Static, and great, you don't need to then tell me that we're going to concentrate on inclusivity and diversity, because the Milestone universe already existed. So I already get it. I get it. Stubble McShave says, shouldn't the Dune teaser be released by now? Well, it's coming out in December. And I think, obviously, one of the things that they wait for when trailers come out is a big movie. And they've probably been holding off. I think we're seeing a Dune trailer in front of Tenet. That's what I would imagine. So we shall see, Stubble. I mean, do I want to see that trailer. Dan V says, I'm more surprised that John Ridley's other history of the DC Universe is coming out since it was solicited 2 years ago. He's also getting a new miniseries. He most likely would have written Luke Fox as Batman for 5G, which is dead. Yeah, he probably would have. I mean, look, I love John Ridley. I love him as a novelist. I love him as a screenwriter. And I can't wait to read more of his comic work. I think it's probably going to be great. And I'm in. Dan goes on to say that the problem is that AT&T was $150 billion in debt last year, which hasn't gotten better, and it's why WB Games will get sold off in the next year, which includes Mortal Kombat, the Arkham games, and the new Suicide Squad game. They cost a lot more to make. Yeah, they do. I'm surprised that they would get rid of a gaming division that's successful, though, because they make so much money. But that's a good point. $150 billion in debt, never a good thing. Stubble McShade says, I'd like to see a slasher movie at an old folks' home. It would be a great example of subverting expectations. Hold the shower scenes of grandmas and grandpas, though. I don't need those. I don't know. A killer at an old folks' home. Wow. I don't know. Johnny Stewart sends in a super chat and says, the Lynch weather reports are great. Laugh out loud. I hope you guys have been watching your David Lynch weather reports. I need to watch them now to find out how he's talking about all of this this heat. Maybe Felix Leiter sends in a tip and says, Robert the Wise. I saw an article the other day where the editor of Hereditary is also the editor for Tenet. Now, I haven't seen all of Hereditary because I enjoy sleeping, but I'm curious what exactly the job of an editor on a major movie entails. Well, being an editor myself, have I told you that I just recently edited Tango Shalom, the feature film? I'm just kidding. I know you've heard that. What does the job on a... Okay. An editor is one of the most important people, most important positions on a film. Now, when a movie is shot, okay, when you're, I'll give you an example. It's an easy example. So say you're having a conversation with 4 people sitting at a table. Say they're having lunch in a cafe or dinner or something, and say there's 4 people at a circular table. All right. Now, how do you shoot? The director and the cinematographer have to figure out how they shoot the scene. So if you're shooting a scene, a dinner table scene with 4 people at a table, let me break down and give you how many shots on average. Like if I was directing the scene off the top of my head, if someone said, how many setups do you want? How many shots? How many actual individual shots do you need? let me take you through what I would do. The first thing you do is you probably want some kind of an establishing shot where your characters come and they all sit down, and that becomes what's called the master. And you shoot the entire scene from the master. And if there's people coming and going, and if they need to see, I'm assuming that nothing at the restaurant, they don't have to spy somebody, it's just their conversation. But so you got the master with them, and maybe the master shot's moving around them, a la Quentin Tarantino or something. So that's your big master, big wide master. That's one shot. Then you're going to want to get medium and close-ups on each character. And when I say medium or close-ups, a medium is like this, okay, and a close-up would be this. So suddenly you've got 4 people there. So now we have 8 shots of just your mediums and your close-ups of our main characters and your master. That is 9 shots. Then you might want to get 2 shots, meaning 2 shots where you have 2 of the characters in the frame, right? So you have 2 people in the frame, and maybe you want to get combinations of those 2 shots with every other character, however you want to shoot that. So you can see that those are all what are called pieces of coverage. I want to get coverage on this person. So let's just say between the mediums and the close-ups, the 2 shots, your master, then if what they're eating and drinking is important, you might want to get what are called insert shots. Someone's iced tea being refilled, that becomes an insert shot. Or if somebody's fiddling with a straw, that could become an insert shot. So let's say, for the sake of argument, we have 20 pieces of coverage of this one conversation at this table. The editor's job is to then take all of those pieces of film, because remember, it's the same conversation over and over again. The editor has to figure out at which point when do you go from one shot to another? And how do you use those 20 pieces of coverage? Now, let's say it's a very important conversation in the movie, and let's say the movie, the scene lasts 4 minutes. There might be, let's just say, for the sake of argument, I don't know, it's a fast-paced scene. There's an argument, there might be 150 cuts in that scene. When do you go to the close-up? When do you go to the medium? When do you go to the close-up? When do you go to the 2-shot? When do you go to the fiddling? And all of it, and as you're going, you're creating tension. See, and you're not always on the person talking either. Let's say you're on the person talking and the person has a shocking revelation, and then you want to see all 3 of the other people's reactions. You might cut to their boom, 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 quick reactions. They arch their eyebrows or whatever. So the entire scene, even though it's been directed and shot, it needs to now be constructed and built, because what's necessarily how the scene was written doesn't tell you all the cuts and the ebbs and the flows in the scene. That is all manufactured and created in editing. And that's why people say that a movie is written 3 times, once on the page, once while you're shooting it, and the third and final time is in the edit bay, because in the edit bay, it's all about the images that you see. So what a feature film editor does is then I'd imagine that for an entire movie. Like every scene has that many pieces of coverage. You have to figure out, how do you put this together to actually tell the story? Because there's a language, that's the language of pure cinema, the language of images. And so it's not just what people are saying, it's you're heightening the tension, you're creating reactions, action and reaction, thoughts and revelation, and all of these things. And you might spend 2 weeks cutting just that 4-minute sequence. Maybe longer, depending on how important it is. So in a nutshell, that's what an editor does, and it's an incredibly important position on a film. So, yeah. So that's kind of what it is. I mean, that's one day, since you asked, I think I should make a video using a scene from Tango Shalom. What does an editor do? And take you through cutting a scene, like pick a scene. I can't do that right now. Obviously, the movie would have to get released. But that's a good idea. I should do that. There used to be editorial, like on Laserdiscs, there were editorial things that you could, like workshops and things, you could see how a scene was edited. Benjamin23 sends in a super chat and said, there used to be a fan-made trailer of Han Solo in modern Los Angeles. The Falcon is a classic 1970s muscle car. Can't find it on YouTube anymore. Have you seen it? I have not seen that, but that sounds pretty great to me. Wow. I haven't seen it. What's it called? I'd love to see that. Michael Preston sends in a super chat and says, did Jim Lee say that DC print medium is being eliminated and just saw Games Master of Triskelion? Did they insinuate Uhura was sexually assaulted? Well, I'll tell you, in the Gamesters of Triskelion, there is evidence to support that maybe she was sexually assaulted. We don't know, but it was pretty rough. But, yeah, you could read it that way if you wanted to, I suppose. I'd like to think that they don't get that bad, but it's definitely there. Phage Lives sends in a super chat and says, it's in reference of Kirk getting a happy ending in fan fiction you were talking about earlier in the show. Yes. I was just making a joke about Kirk getting a happy ending. I should have made it clear that he got a happy ending in a number of episodes of Star Trek. Honest Asian Guy sends in a tip and says, Rob, there is no justice in this world. The Abyss is streaming in 4x3 full screen, while Battlefield Earth and Mr. No Legs are on Blu-ray. The cinema gods are cruel indeed. My own film, Free Enterprise, is streaming. It's an early, horrible version of the movie in 4x3. I just don't understand. In this day and age, there's no excuse. No excuse. Calvin Bose is back. He says, I miss fan clubs when you used to get membership cards and buttons and photos and newsletters. Did you ever join, Andy, and what did they send you? Yes, well, I got Bantha Tracks, the Star Wars fan club newsletter, and I was able to get my Revenge of the Jedi one-sheets ordering from Bantha Tracks. I loved Bantha Tracks. I loved getting the patches, the Empire Strikes Back crew patch and all that. I loved it. And I was a Blue Blazer regular. I got that newsletter. But I didn't go so much in for fan clubs. Not much. But Bantha Tracks was really kind of the first one. So, yeah. Now I have a letter. Our man, the chairman, Jeffrey Mao, is here. Dear Rob and all the Robservers of the Post-Geek Singularity, once again, it is I, the chairman, bringing you another review of a film from the Warner Archives. This is going to be fun. This time it's Year of the Dragon, the 1985 crime drama starring Mickey Rourke and John Lone, directed by Michael Cimino and co-written by Oliver Stone and Cimino, based on the novel by Robert Daly. First off, please note that none of those names are Chinese in the slightest. I always hesitate to talk or think about films in terms of could they be made today, because films are a product of their time. We have to evaluate them based on that perspective. Obviously, the film is controversial enough when it was first released, and to this day, that there is a health warning at the beginning of the film stating the usual blah, blah, blah about the film not being racist and all that, which is fine to do. But as well-educated and well-rounded film aficionados, we should all not need such warnings. Also, I don't like the final warning about any similarity in the film between anything in it and reality being accidental. Isn't that what appears at the end of every film? Also, I think accidental is the wrong word. Wouldn't unintentional be better? Or is it just a semantic argument? If so, please ignore what I just wrote. So with that out of the way, let's get on to the film itself. There's quite a lot to unpack about this film, without regard to its current problematic nature. First off, it relates a very large issue of how smaller ethnic, racial, and religious groups are portrayed in mainstream Hollywood films, and that those film portrayals frequently involve a crime or are overtly criminal. Now, in the same year, Witness was released. This film showcased the Amish community of Pennsylvania as it had never been shown before, but it was done as part of a crime film. Harrison Ford's character is our audience surrogate to that community, a typical trope in the ethnic expose genre. While the Amish themselves are not criminals at all, merely unwittingly involved in the affair, it makes you wonder if a film about the Amish would ever have been made if it was not a crime film. Maybe at the time, Hollywood studios felt the only way to do that was to somehow make it a crime film. In 1992, we also got Thunderheart, which is your rare modern Native American film, which of course also was a crime film. Would we ever have gotten a modern Native American film otherwise if it wasn't a crime film? Well, Smoke Signals was pretty good. In that light, I guess, given the time when it came out, I don't have a problem with Year of the Dragon. Because basically, the film is not telling us anything that isn't true. Is it telling us the complete story of the Chinese American community in the USA? No. But no one film can do that, and that wasn't the purpose for the book on which it was based, and the film. There are several different Chinese communities in the United States, and the one on display in Year of the Dragon is only one of them. The film's claims about the existence of large and powerful criminal organizations such as the Tongs and the Triads, with its global reach and operating out of several countries and continents, is quite true. The names used in the film are fictional, but there are very real counterparts. When John Lone's Joey Tai goes to visit the general in the Burmese jungle with the huge army, there is a real army. A division of the Chinese Nationalist Army escaped to northern Burma after the communist defeat and proceeded to set up shop by, of course, growing and selling opium. So Year of the Dragon was quite influential in introducing the West to the concept of Chinese organized crime, and we all got much more familiar with it later on with the importing of Hong Kong films that were laden with triad stories. It was no longer a myth, as claimed in the film by Mickey Rourke's character's police superiors. Speaking of Rourke, he plays Stanley White, a highly decorated New York police captain who frequently butts heads with his superiors in obsessively hunting down the Chinese mafia led by Lone's Joey Tai. White is presented as very complex, with a high regard for his action-oriented police work, contrasting sharply with his more career-minded and bureaucratic superiors, who frequently try and hold him back. White is also haunted by his experience in Vietnam, which colors his attitudes towards Asians in general, and the Chinese specifically. I don't know how much of this characterization was from the novel, but I bet good money that Oliver Stone had a hand in writing a lot of the Vietnam stuff. It's a cliche that every Vietnam vet cop in the mid to late 80s films is still fighting the war at home on the streets. The implication that White is using the Chinese thugs that he's gunning down in New York as some kind of revenge for not winning in Vietnam is troubling. It comes out in his complaints to his bosses about having to back off. He just wants to win for once. Of course, he's... the Chinese aren't the Vietnamese or even the Cambodians. White's obsessiveness and self-destructiveness nearly caused the investigation to derail. It gets his estranged wife killed, a rookie Chinese undercover cop killed, he and his partner are both shot, and a Chinese news reporter whom he has fallen in love with is raped. That reporter, Tracy, is played on debut by Ariane. Yes, only one name. A Japanese-American actress who apparently was only 21 or 22 years of age during the filming. She has quite a big role in this film, and unfortunately both her acting and the character itself are the weakest parts, although she is smoking hot. Ariane is trying her best, but she's not very good, with most of her lines delivered in the same dry, wooden manner. It detracts from the intended impact that the character is supposed to have. The writing of the character is not very well executed either, with changes in mood and attitude coming out of nowhere, especially in her feelings towards White. At first, she doesn't want him, claiming she has a boyfriend. White suspects that this boyfriend isn't real, and maybe he is, maybe he isn't, but the whole point gets forgotten about. White kind of sort of forces himself on her after taking her home. It's probably not helped by the fact that White's wife, Connie, has just kicked him out of the house. Afterwards, White just shows up saying that he's going to move in. She again tries to reject him, but then they end up in bed again, and she says that she loves him. Huh? Where did that come from? Then after White's wife is killed in a gang hit gone wrong, White and his crew set up shop in her apartment, and she is livid, kicking them out. Then, as the heat rises with the gang violence, Ty dispatches 3 thugs to force Tracy into silence by raping her. White later meets her at the news studio, telling her how to show up with her crew for the big drug raid. She refuses, and in probably her best acting scene, demands that he leave her alone. White, by this point, is stripped of his command, but goes rogue, guns down Ty, and I'm guessing foils the drug shipment. At the end, White, who apparently is still a cop, hasn't been fired or suspended or apparently disciplined in any way for his rogue takedown of Ty, tries to crash Ty's funeral, going after the bosses who are taking over. Tracy, who is covering the funeral, goes to his aid after he nearly gets trampled. It now appears that she's back with him, says he's crazy, but is still okay with that? So who's more crazy, he or she? I don't get it. Of course, it's obvious why Ariane was cast as Tracy. There weren't a lot of Asian American actresses at the time who could have played the intended role, who had the looks and could play an American-born Chinese, and also wasn't doing nude scenes, especially one of her taking a shower and then answering the door that White was knocking on. Given that she had only a handful of roles later on, according to the IMDb, not many others thought she had talent either. At first, I thought she was a singer or a model or something like that, as it would have been typical casting choice, but apparently she wasn't. So there you have it, Rob, my review of Year of the Dragon. I should also mention this film has the loudest gunshots I've ever heard in a film. Next up is The Hidden, which I have seen before, but I think it was a VHS rental from way back in the day. It's already looking good from the little bit I saw this morning. Thanks, Jeff. Well, Jeffrey, I'm a big fan of Year of the Dragon, and everything you said about it is absolutely correct. I mean, I'm a sucker for Asian culture. I've always loved Asian culture. I've always been fascinated by it. Like I said, you know, if I was reincarnated as somebody with of Asian descent, I'd want to be my man Tony Leung. Maybe Chow Yun Fat, but Tony Leung, like In the Mood for Love. If I could be that Tony Leung, I'd be a happy man. So, you know, You're the Dragon, I like it. I always look at those kinds of movies. Witness is a perfect example. To me, movies like Witness and You're the Dragon are almost science fiction, and it's about my proxy character, and this Stanley White in this case, who's going to into an alien world. You know, is being immersed in the alien world of Chinatown in New York in the mid '80s, and I like those stories. John Book, Harrison Ford's character in Witness, goes to the Amish planet, you know, and I think that's why I'm fascinated by those things. And it goes back to the granddaddy of all, which was the miniseries Shogun from the 1980. I mean, I love that so much. I can't even tell you. It just made me, I wanted to pillow with a Japanese girl after that, if you know what I'm saying. I mean, Yoko Shimada, I love that kind of stuff. And I do think the movie's incredibly racist, however. And obviously, you know, they try and couch the racism underneath the fact that Stanley White is a racist because of his experiences in Vietnam. But I get that. You know, I get that. It's very interesting. And look, the movie has a lot of great filmmaking in it. Obviously, Michael Cimino was trying to get back to the glory days of The Deer Hunter. He made Thunderbolt. Michael Cimino's kind of a tragic case in a way, because he made Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, and then he ended up making The Deer Hunter, which, you know, won Best Picture. And then after that, he was so full of himself, he made Heaven's Gate, which turned out to be a big debacle, even though the film is pretty good, especially if you watch the extended Blu-ray. It's pretty amazing. And then, of course, he made things like a remake of The Desperate Hours, and then he made Year of the Dragon, which I really like Year of the Dragon. And you keep reminding me it's a Blu-ray I need to get. I have the DVD right over there, and I have not replaced it with the Blu-ray, so I need to get that. So, yes. There you go. But that's a great review. Keep them coming. I can't wait to read your review of The Hidden. Calvin Bose is back, and he said, did you see they're remaking Blazing Saddles as an animated film with a dog sheriff in a cat town? Yeah. Where are the felines at? I don't know what they're going to do. That's going to be interesting. Are they going to have the baked beans scene? You know, I just read that Blazing Saddles is finally getting a disclaimer from the same scholar who did the disclaimer or the warning label for Gone with the Wind, which I think is hilarious. You know, that it's hilarious that they're afraid that Blazing Saddles, which would be highly offensive, that people wouldn't get that, yes, it's a parody. It's making fun of racism. That's the point. The fact that you need to be told this these days shows how far we've fallen as an intellectual culture. Benjamin23 sends in a super chat and says, I just found it. It's still on YouTube. This is the Solo movie where he's in Los Angeles. It's called Solo the Movie by Joel Pullman. 14 years old. I forgot the name. Wow, well, there you go. Solo the Movie. Well, ladies and gentlemen, kind souls, gentle beings from across the 28 known galaxies, however you identify. I just wanted to remind you that at 4 o'clock, in a mere 22 minutes, I am going to be interviewing Cary Hiroyuki Tagawa. Or is it Hiroyuki? I better get it right. Cary Tagawa, one of my favorite Asian actors, who's been in so many different things, including, by the way, he was in Encounter at Farpoint, the pilot for Star Trek The Next Generation, in addition to everything else he's been in. But join me, it's free, in Hall A over at the Mainframe Comic-Con. So again, go to mainframecomiccon.com and find me for an hour conversation with Cary Hiroyuki Tagawa. How exciting is that? It's very exciting for me. I hope he's nice. But anyway, so join me for that in 20 minutes, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to end this Robservations episode number 490. I want to thank everybody for the support of the channel. I want to thank you for your letters. Remember, if you've sent me a letter in, all the letters are, again, being put up on the website. Now, there's some people, like Jordy Lyons has asked me where his letter has been. I don't quite know. I've got to find it. We had a bit of a snafu there getting letters, but we're back on the letter train. And if I don't read your letter on the show for whatever reason, it's a good bet it's probably on the website. You'll be able to go on the website once again and comment. And the website is theburnettwork.net. Keep sending me emails. Keep sending me videos. I will play them on the show. I want to thank my moderating staff. I want to thank Mike Bodden. I want to thank Greg Smith. I want to thank Joshua Levesque and Mr. Derringer and Robert Pariso. And, of course, I think I got everybody who was here. And I also want to thank, of course, The Richard for being The Richard, you crazy madman you. You can always go to the Post-Geek Singularity Facebook page and the Whining About Movies Facebook page and find Richard. He's always doing watch parties. I want to remind everybody that we will be back here tonight. Elizabeth and I will be back here at 7:30. We'll be back here at 7:30 for Whining About Movies, episode number 66, where we're going to be discussing Cameron Crowe's 1989 adult teen film, Say Anything. So join us for that. And I just want to tell you that remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, I hope you'll join me in 20 minutes over mainframecomiccon.com and come to Hall A, where I'm going to be interviewing Mr. Tagawa, and it's going to be very exciting. So thank you very much, and as always, have a better day. And yes, I will be back on the morrow, as it were.